नमो ओं विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस एसी भक्ति वेदांतो स्वामी श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, I hope all you are doing well. Today we will be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1, canto 1, chapter 1, text 4. We already have completed three texts from Srimad Bhagavatam. If you still have not listened, you can check out from the playlist. So before we start, let's pray first. Then we begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritam Naranchaivo Narattamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatam Jayamudiraye. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. नमो ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य दिशतारिणे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So let's begin. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 4. नैमिषे नैमिषे निमिषाक्षेत्रे ऋषया शौनकादया सत्रं स्वर्गलोकया सहस्र समम् असत. निमिषे नैमिषारण्यक्षेत्रे ऋषया शौनकादया शत्रं स्वर्गलोकाया सहस्रसमम् आसता. निमिषे नैमिषारण्यक्षेत्रे ऋषया शौनकादया सत्रं स्वर्गलोकाया सहस्रसमम् आशता. निमिषे नैमिषाक्षेत्रे ऋषया शौनकादया सत्रं स्वर्गलोकाया सहस्रसमम् आसता. Synonym: Nimishe, in the forest known as a Naimisharanya, a Nimisha the spot which is easily a favorite of Vishnu, who does not close his eyelid. Rashaya, saga. Rishaya means saga or sages, you can pronounce. Saunaka headed by sage Saunaka. Satram, sacrifice. Swargaya, the Lord who glorified the heaven. Lokaya, and for the devotee who are always in touch with the Lord. Sahasra, one touch. Samam, year. Asata, performed. Translation: Once in a holy place in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages headed by the sage Saunakya assembled to perform a great 1,000-year sacrifice for the satisfaction of Lord and his devotee. Once in holy place in the forest of Naimisharanya, great sages headed by the sage Saunakya assembled to perform a great 1,000-year sacrifice for the satisfaction of Lord and his devotees. Purport is given by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The prelude of Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken in the previous three sloka. Now, in the main topic of this great literature is being presented. Srimad Bhagavatam, after its first recitation by Srila Shukdev Goswami, was repeated for the second time at Naimisharanya. In the Vayavya Tantra, it is said that Brahma, the engineer of the particular universe, contemplated a great wheel which could enclose the universe. The hub of the great circle was fixed at the particular place known as Naimisharanya. Similarly, there is always reference to the forest of Naimisharanya in the Baraha Purana, when it is stated that by performance of sacrifice at this plate, the strength of demoniac people is curtailed. Thus, Brahmanas prefer Naimisharanya for such sacrificial performance. The devotee of Lord Vishnu offer all kind of sacrifice for his pleasure. The devotee are always attached to the service of the Lord, wherein the fallen soul are attached to the pleasure of material existence. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that anything performed in the material world for any reason other than the pleasure of Lord Vishnu causes a further bondage for the performer. It is enjoined, therefore, all act must be performed sacrificially for the satisfaction of Vishnu and his devotee. This will bring everyone peace and prosperity. The great sages are always anxious to do good for people in general. And such sages, headed by Saunaka and other, assembled at the holy place of Naimisharanya with a program of performing a great and continuous chain of sacrificial ceremony. Forgetful men do not know the right path of peace and prosperity. However, the sages knows it well. Therefore, it is a good for all men. They are always anxious to perform act which may bring about peace in the world. They are sincere friend of all living entity. At the risk of at the risk of great personal inconvenience, they are always engaged in the service of the Lord for the good of all people. Lord Vishnu is just like a great tree, and other, including the demigod, main, Siddhas, Charanas, Vidyadhara, and all other living entity, are like a branches, twig, and leaf of that tree. By pouring water on the root of the tree, all part of the tree are automatically nourished. Only those branches and leaves which are detached cannot be satisfied. Detached branches and leaves dry up gradually despite all watering attempt. Similarly, human society, it is when it is detached from the personality garden like detached branch and leaves is not capable of being watered. And one attempt to do so is simply wasting his energy and resources. The modern materialistic society is detached from its relation to the Supreme Lord and its plan, which are being made by atheistic leader are sure to be baffled at every step. Yet they do not wake up to this. In this age, the congregational chanting of holy name of the Lord is prescribed method for waking up. The way and mean are most scientifically presented by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. An intelligent person may take advantage of this teaching in order to bring about real peace and prosperity. Srimad Bhagavatam is also presented for the same purpose, and this will be explained more specifically later in this text. Okay, so here we conclude the reading of Bhaktivedanta purport for the day. I hope all you have understood. Now let's jump into the inside. We have made separate and video and audio presentation for it, and we are attaching both of it with the original one. So please listen till the end. You will have the better understanding. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating passage from the ancient Hindu scripture, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it describes a religious ceremony on a scale that is, well, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. Okay, so let's get right into it. The story kicks off with this absolutely staggering event. You've got this huge gathering of great sages, led by a figure named Shaunaka, and they've all come together for one single unified purpose. And get this, the ceremony they're planning is set to last for 1,000 years. I mean, just let that sink in. 1,000 years. That's not just a long time. That's a commitment that spans entire generations. It immediately makes you ask, right? What could possibly be so important to justify an undertaking this massive? So to even begin to understand a 1,000-year commitment, the first clue we get isn't about the why, it's about the where. They held this ceremony in a forest called Naimisharanya, and that location was chosen for a very specific and very powerful reason.
According to the source material, this was no ordinary patch of woods. It was seen as a place with immense cosmic and spiritual significance. The text even points out that part of its name suggests it's a spot especially favored by the deity Vishnu, who is described, pretty poetically, as the one who does not close his eyelids.
And this is why they picked this exact spot. According to the commentary, it was considered nothing less than the spiritual center of the universe, the actual hub of a great cosmic wheel. The sages believed that by performing their sacrifice here, their actions would have the maximum possible impact, that they could directly push back against what the text calls demoniac, or negative forces. Okay, so they've got the perfect spot. But a location, no matter how powerful, is just a location without the right motivation. To really get to the bottom of this thousand-year ceremony, we need to understand a crucial distinction the text makes about the very nature of action itself.
See, in this worldview, an action's result is defined entirely by why you do it. Two people could do the exact same thing, but for one person, it leads to freedom, and for the other, it leads to more entanglement or bondage. It all comes down to the motivation behind the act.
And that is the absolute key to understanding this. The sages weren't doing this for themselves. According to the text, any action that's done for personal gain, for your own pleasure, just leads to more bondage. But actions performed sacrificially for a higher purpose are said to bring peace and prosperity to everyone, and that was their goal.
Now, I know this can sound a bit abstract, but luckily the commentary in the source text gives us this really beautiful and powerful analogy that makes the logic behind this whole thousand-year sacrifice crystal clear.
I want you to just picture this for a moment. Imagine the entire universe, all of existence, every living thing, every person, every animal, as one single massive tree. We're all just leaves or branches on this tree, and like any tree, it all grows from one common root.
And this is where it all clicks into place. This is the sage's logic. Instead of trying to run around and help every single individual leaf and branch, which is an impossible task, right? They focused all of their energy on nourishing the one single root. The belief was that by satisfying the source of everything, the benefits would just naturally flow out to every single part of creation.
And that's the whole idea in a nutshell. Selfless acts that are dedicated to the source of creation end up sustaining the whole of creation. It's really an argument for focusing on systemic impact over just individual scattered efforts.
Now, this tree analogy isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. The text uses it to make a very direct and pretty pointed critique of human society, drawing a clear line between two fundamentally different ways of living.
It draws this stark contrast. On one hand, you have a society that understands its connection to its spiritual source. It's like a healthy branch, able to be nourished and thrive. On the other hand, you have a society that's detached. It's like a broken branch lying on the ground. You can pour all the water you want on it, but because it's lost its connection to the root, it's just a waste of energy.
And from the perspective of this ancient text, a society that ignores its spiritual root will constantly find its efforts for peace and prosperity frustrated. The commentary is pretty unambiguous here, suggesting that without that fundamental connection, even the best-laid plans are sure to be, in its words, baffled at every step.
So this ancient story, with this powerful metaphor of the cosmic tree at its center, leaves us with a really provocative question. It challenges us to think about connection, about purpose, and about what it is that truly nourishes a society and brings it lasting peace.
Now we completed the video presentation. Let's begin with audio podcast.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something really quite staggering, a commitment that sort of dwarfs our usual timescales. A 1,000-year sacrifice. They called it a satra, specifically a Sahasra Samam. Imagine that. A group of great sages, Sunaka leading them, in this place called Naimiranya, committing to a ritual for a millennium. And our mission here isn't just, gawking at the number 1,000 years, though that alone is pretty mind-bending. We want to really dive into the philosophy behind it. What does this tell us about purpose, about sacrifice, about community? Especially maybe compared to how we think about things now. What can this massive ancient commitment teach us about, say, focus and action in our own really fast-paced world?
Yeah, that's a really good way to frame it, because the source material, the Srimad Bhagavatam, is very clear. This wasn't just for show. It wasn't ancient performance art. This satra, this sacrifice, it had a very specific, very high-level purpose. It was performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord Vyon, and crucially also for his devotees.
So not just for God in the abstract, but for the community of beings connected to him.
Exactly, which essentially means for the benefit of all living beings, ultimately. It was about welfare, not just, personal spiritual points. And one more thing about the location.
Naimiranya.
Yes, it's hugely significant. This wasn't the first time the Bhagavatam was recited, but it was the site of the second major recitation. So the place itself is deeply tied to the text we're exploring.
Okay, let's anchor there then. Naimiranya. The name itself, I read, might mean Animisa Ketra, a place linked to Vinu as Animisa. the one whose eyes don't close.
That's one understanding, yes. It signifies a place he especially favors, where his presence is strongly felt.
So why this forest? Why Namyoranya for something lasting 1,000 years? Was it just, I don't know, remote and peaceful, easy to get on with the ritual?
Well, it was certainly conducive, but it goes much deeper than convenience. It's described almost like a spiritual nexus point, a cosmic axis. According to one text, the Vayaviyatancha, think about Brahma, the universe's engineer, he conceived of this great cosmic wheel encompassing everything.
Okay.
And the hub, the absolute center of that massive wheel, that was fixed right at Namyarnya.
Wow. So not just a quiet spot in India, but literally the pinpoint center of the conceived cosmos.
That's the idea presented, yes. It gives the actions performed there a kind of universal resonance.
That really elevates this sacrifice, doesn't it? It's
Right.
not just a long ritual. It's like they were tending to the very axis of reality.
Precisely. It's about stabilizing the whole system. And there's more. Another text, the Varaha Puran, adds another layer.
Go on.
It says that performing sacrifices there, specifically at Namyaranya, actually weakens the influence of, well, what the texts call demoniac people or forces, people acting against cosmic order.
Interesting. So it's both a central point and a place with a kind of spiritual power to counteract negativity.
Exactly. That combination, cosmic centrality and this inherent spiritual potency, is why the Brahmins, the knowledgeable class dedicated to these things, really preferred it for major undertakings like this one.
They saw it as the most effective place to perform actions for the world's benefit.
Yes. They weren't just scholars. They were seen as responsible for maintaining that balance through these specific prescribed actions.
Okay, so the location is profoundly significant. Let's shift now to the action itself, the philosophy underpinning this 1,000-year effort. You mentioned it was for V2's satisfaction. The source links this to the Bhagavad Gita, right? Saying that any action done for reasons other than pleasing Vita actually leads to more bondage.
That's a key principle, yes. Yadirtat karmanant, nyatra lokko yat karma bandhan. Actions performed as a sacrifice for Veep don't bind you. Any other action done for personal gain, for fame, even just out of habit without higher purpose.
Binds you, entangles you more in the material world.
Correct. It creates karma, reactions that keep the soul tied to the cycle of birth and death.
That seems incredibly strict. I mean, we all do things every day just to survive, to work, to look after family. Does the text imply all that is just creating more bondage if it's not consciously for Vijun? What about basic acts of kindness or charity?
It's a challenging point, for sure. The philosophy isn't saying don't act, don't be kind, don't provide. It's about the consciousness and the ultimate purpose behind the action.
Yeah.
If the driving force is ultimately self-centered, I want to feel good, I want others to praise me, I need this for my comfort, even if the action looks good on the surface, it still generates that binding reaction.
So the solution offered by the sages
Is to perform all actions as yaja, as sacrifice, specifically aiming for the satisfaction of the supreme Vino and by extension his devotees, which means everyone. This is presented not just as a spiritual preference, but as the only practical way to achieve real lasting peace and prosperity for society, because it aligns individual action with the welfare of the whole cosmic system and frees the individual from those binding reactions.
So it's not dismissing good works, but saying they reach their full potential, their non-binding potential, only when connected to this ultimate selfless purpose.
You could put it that way, yes. It reframes the ultimate beneficiary.
This really casts the sages, like Sunaka, in a different light. They weren't just doing this for themselves, for their own spiritual advancement.
Not primarily, no. The texts describe them as Bhupahita, friends to all living beings. They were deeply concerned about people in general, especially those described as forgetful of this path.
So they took on this immense burden, this 1,000-year task, almost as a service, to maintain cosmic balance for everyone else.
That's strongly implied. They saw it as necessary for collective well-being, even at great personal inconvenience, which brings up your earlier point about the timescale.
Right, 1,000 years. How does that even work logistically? People don't live that long.
Well, the sources suggest a couple of things. First, it implies continuity across generations. It wasn't just one group. It required a sustained commitment, passing the knowledge, the responsibility, the ritual itself down the line.
An intergenerational project of immense scale.
Exactly. The task itself becomes the focus, bigger than any single person or lifespan. And second, it really underscores their motivation, this deep anxiety to do good, to maintain this connection for the world, whatever the personal cost. They saw the path to peace and took responsibility for it.
That concept of the task transcending the individual is quite powerful. It shifts the focus entirely away from personal gain.
It does. And this leads very nicely into a really helpful analogy the text uses to explain how this all works, this idea of integrated action and nourishing the whole system.
Yes, the tree analogy. Let's hear about that.
Okay, so picture a huge sprawling tree. That tree represents the source, Lord Vio.
The root and trunk.
Essentially, yes, the foundation of everything. Now, everything else in existence, all the different kinds of beings, they're compared to the parts of the tree. You have the demigods, humans, but also other types mentioned, like siddhas, karans, vigitaras. They're all pictured as the branches, the smaller twigs, the leaves, all connected, all part of this one organism.
Okay, I can visualize that. A single cosmic tree.
Right. Now, how do you nourish a tree? The most effective way.
You water the root.
Exactly. You pour water on the root, and when you do that, the water, the nourishment, automatically travels up the trunk, out through the branches, reaching every single part, right down to the tiniest leaf.
Makes sense.
So the principle being illustrated is that devotional acts, sacrificial acts performed for Vioan, watering the root, automatically satisfy and nourish all other beings, the branches and leaves. You don't need a separate program for each demigod or each group of humans.
And the flip side, trying to water the leaves directly.
Is futile, or at least incredibly inefficient. If you take a leaf or a branch off the tree and try to water it separately, what happens?
It dries up. It's detached from the life source.
Precisely. The analogy says trying to satisfy all the different parts individually without connection to the root is a waste of energy. Those detached parts, those efforts, will inevitably wither because they lack that fundamental connection.
Okay, it's a very clear visual. How does the text connect this to, well, to the world?
This is where it gets quite pointed. The text uses this analogy to critique what it sees as the state of modern materialistic society. It basically says that contemporary society has become detached from this root, from its relationship with the Supreme Lord. People are trying desperately to nourish the leaves and branches directly.
Trying to solve problems locally, focusing on the symptoms without addressing the root cause?
That's the implication, and the text makes a rather stark prediction about the results of this approach.
What does it say?
It says that all the plans, all the elaborate strategies made by leaders who operate from this detached atheistic standpoint, they are sure to be baffled at every step.
Baffled. That's a strong word.
It is. It suggests that despite immense effort, resources, intelligence poured into solving worldly problems, poverty, conflict, environmental issues, if the actions aren't rooted in that connection to the source, they're ultimately doomed to fall short, to be frustrated.
And the text observes that people don't see this.
It adds that key phrase, they do not wake up to this reality. They keep trying the same detached methods, wondering why things don't fundamentally improve.
Wow, that's quite a critique. Looking at the world today with so many persistent crises despite so much effort, the text would say it's because we're watering leaves.
But that's exactly the diagnosis offered. We're focusing huge energy on the branches while ignoring the root system.
Okay, if detachment is the disease and secular leaf watering plans are baffled, what's the prescribed cure, especially for now, for this age, Kali Yuga?
The texts are very direct about the remedy for this specific age. It needs to be something powerful, accessible, and unifying, given the widespread detachment. The primary method recommended is the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord, Harinama Sankirtana.
Chanting together. That's the antidote.
That's presented as the most effective means for reestablishing that connection, for waking up in this age. And importantly, it's not just a vague suggestion. The text credits Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared about 500 years ago, with having most scientifically presented the ways and means for this practice.
Scientifically presented. What does that imply? Like it's a repeatable process with predictable results.
That's the sense, yes. Not scientific in terms of lab coats and test tubes, obviously, but systematic, based on principles, observable in its effects. A method designed to yield a result of reconnection, leading to real peace and prosperity.
So the Bhagavad Gita itself, the text recited at that 1,000-year sacrifice,
Is presented for this very purpose, to guide people, especially intelligent people looking for real solutions, towards this effective method, moving away from the inevitably baffled plans.
It's quite a journey we've taken then, from this epic 1,000-year ritual at a place considered the center of the cosmos,
Right.
through this philosophy of action needing to be connected to the root,
The tree analogy, yeah.
to this critique of modern detached efforts, and finally, a very specific prescribed solution for today: congregational chanting.
It all threads together. The core message is consistent. Connection to the source is paramount for individual and collective well-being. Detachment leads to frustration.
So the 1,000-year sacrifice wasn't just an ancient marvel. It embodies a principle they believed was vital then, and according to these texts, is just as vital now.
Exactly. It's presented as timeless wisdom, not just history, a user manual for navigating a challenging age, which really leaves us with a pretty significant thought to ponder, doesn't it? Stemming right from that initial sacrifice.
What's that?
Well, if those sages, Sunaka and the others, saw the need and were willing to commit to a 1,000-year endeavor, a Sahasra Samam, just to maintain that connection for everyone's benefit, what level of focus, what kind of commitment or even sacrifice might be needed from us today to reforge that root connection? Especially when we see so many efforts around us seemingly, well, baffled. Are we, willing to seriously investigate what these texts mean by a scientifically presented spiritual method if the conventional approaches keep hitting a wall? It certainly gives you something to think about.